Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking some truly fascinating insights from the Phi Theta Kappa Honors Program Guide. We are going to start off with Dr. Susan Edwards' core essay on exactly why stories are biologically essential to us. And then, we're going to pivot and dive really deep into Theme 4, which explores why preserving those stories is such a massive, monumental challenge. It's this beautiful but honestly dramatic tension we're going to look at today. We're exploring why stories literally make us human, yet why they are so incredibly easy to lose forever.
Okay, let's dive into this. There's this incredibly profound thought highlighted in Dr. Edwards' essay from author Lisa Cron, and it completely reframes how we view human development. Listen to this. Story, it turns out, was crucial to our evolution, more so than opposable thumbs. Opposable thumbs let us hang on, story told us what to hang on to. I mean, wow, right? We always think of physical traits as the ultimate key to our survival. But this suggests that while physical tools allowed us to literally grasp the world around us, it was our stories that actually gave us a reason to hold on. They provided the meaning, the culture, and the shared understanding that our ancestors absolutely needed to survive and thrive together.
And you know what's wild? The science absolutely backs this up. Dr. Pamela Rutledge and other neuroscientists have found that stories literally alter our brain chemistry. They temporarily transport us right into the world of the narrative. When we lose ourselves in a tale and identify with the characters, we actually take on their perspectives. This mental transportation stimulates dopamine, it enhances our motivation, and crucially, it helps us build empathy and feel way less isolated in our own day-to-day lives.
Which brings us to a really incredible number, 23. According to a study by experts at the Yale University School of Public Health, being a bookworm can actually increase your longevity by as much as 23%. Just think about that for a second. The simple act of reading, of really immersing yourself in narratives, doesn't just improve the quality of your emotional life, it might literally extend your physical life. It just underscores how deeply biologically intertwined storytelling is with human health and vitality.
But right here is where we hit a massive contradiction. And honestly, it's the core dramatic tension of our explainer today. If stories are quite literally essential to our survival, if they build our empathy and actually help us live longer, how do we ensure that the stories themselves survive? Because as we are about to see in our deep dive into Theme 4, the preservation of our human narrative is constantly, almost relentlessly, under threat. Section 1. The fragility of the spoken word. Let's start by looking at the most fundamental form of human communication.
Think about your own life for a minute. Did your grandma, Mima, or Nana ever sit you down and tell you a story about her childhood or maybe some family history? Oral storytelling, whether we're talking about grand folktales, musical ballads, or just grandma's story time, is the most timeless form of passing down history. But because it's unrecorded, it is incredibly fragile. The very second the storyteller is gone, if that story hasn't been passed on to someone else, it just vanishes into thin air. It is lost forever.
Moving right along to Section 2, Perils of Physical Preservation.
Now, what's really interesting about this is you might think that once a story is physically recorded or a monument is built, it's totally safe. But physical preservation comes with its own terrifying set of perils. The sheer variety of threats our artifacts face is staggering. We lose historical treasures to natural forces like environmental decay, fires, and floods all the time. But equally devastating are the human-made disasters, willful destruction during conflicts, and perhaps the most tragic one of all, just simple, everyday neglect. Consider these two contrasting examples from the text. We always tend to imagine that the famed Library of Alexandria was dramatically burned to the ground by invaders or zealots, but the historical reality is far more tragic. Over the centuries, it mostly just rotted away. It was a victim of neglect and indifference, picked apart stone by stone. Now, contrast that slow, quiet decay with a very sudden modern loss. During the 2011 Arab Spring, starting on the day of revolt in Egypt, protests erupted, and some stories of ancient Egypt that had endured for millennia were just lost overnight to sudden vandalism and the destruction of historic sites. And you know, even when we actively try to protect things today, modern life just encroaches. Take 9 Mile Canyon in eastern Utah. It is an amazing petroglyph site and an absolute archaeological gold mine, with ancient American Indian rock artifacts dating back 1,700 years. Yet right through this very corridor runs a heavily trafficked road. The everyday, mundane human activity of just driving cars and trucks poses a severe, ongoing threat to the preservation of this incredible ancient story.
That brings us to Section 3, Contested Memories and Narratives. Because physical destruction isn't the only way a story gets lost. Sometimes the threat comes from right inside our own societies. The source text gives us a perfect example of this clash. For generations, American children were taught the traditional narrative that Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, leading to a national holiday celebrating his grand discovery. But when we view this exact same historical event from the perspective of the indigenous peoples whose lands he occupied, the story preserved is one of slavery, disease, and violence. It raises a massive, complicated question about cultural attitudes. When there's a clash like this, which interpretation of the story deserves to be kept alive?
So the crucial point is that these competing narratives can sometimes lead to a complete societal stalemate. For example, back in 1994, a major argument erupted over a planned World War II museum exhibit centered on the Enola Gay. That's the airplane that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. One side wanted the story to depict the Japanese as victims and fundamentally question the morality of President Truman's decision to drop the bomb. On the flip side, veterans and members of Congress strongly contested that narrative, advocating for a focus on the necessity of the decision to end the war.
So what happened? Well, because they simply couldn't agree on the narrative, the exhibit as originally planned was just canceled. Only the plane's fuselage and the bare, basic facts were displayed. There was absolutely no historical or cultural context provided. Because the memory was fiercely contested, the story itself was essentially erased from the display, leaving a void where a really complex human narrative should have been.
Finally, Section 4, the future of preserving stories.
And this brilliantly illustrates the flip side of the coin. As we look at how fragile our past is, we have to look forward. How are modern tools fundamentally changing how we protect our narratives? Well, we're actually using lasers and drones now to uncover what was previously completely invisible. Geologists in Guatemala recently used these high-tech tools to discover a massive, ancient Mayan site hidden right beneath the dense jungle canopy. And it spans 650 square miles. It's such an incredible contrast. We are using the absolute cutting edge of the future to rescue the deep forgotten past.
But of course, as technology advances, it brings up some really massive ethical questions. What will the future look like if artificial intelligence begins to fully harness the power of storytelling? Will AI eventually become the new writer and curator of human history? It's a concept that is both thrilling and, let's be honest, slightly intimidating, especially when you consider how essential human empathy is to the stories we tell.
Furthermore, technology alone cannot solve our societal imbalances. We have to remember that the ability to preserve a story is intimately tied to resources. Economic inequality means that opportunities to record, archive, and share narratives are incredibly unevenly distributed. Because of this, the stories of marginalized groups remain at a constant, disproportionate risk of being lost to time.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. As we face down environmental threats, contested memories, and the rapid rise of AI, what is the actual future of preservation? And most importantly, as we move forward, who gets to tell the story? Stories make us who we are. They build our empathy, and they build our humanity. But saving them requires active, intentional effort from all of us. Keep that question in the back of your mind as you look at the history all around you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.